Hi, my name is Dorian, and this is You, Me, and the Industry. A show where I get to interview people from the games industry and talk with them about their job, the industry, and a bunch of other stuff. In this episode, I am joined by the incredible, talented Lauren Davidson. Lauren is a writer and games designer best known for her incredible work on the point-and-click adventure Thimbleweed Park. We discuss the process of writing great character dialogue, the state of writing in video games, diversity, as well as accessibility, and we both talk about our shared love for the Yakuza franchise. Here we go. Hello everyone and welcome to the show. With me today is Lauren Davidson. Lauren is a freelance writer and games designer. She's also the co-founder of Dropped Monocle Games and a development studio responsible for games such as Mass Goblins and Witchy Witch, right?
Witchy Woo.
Witchy Woo, yes. For some reason it got removed on my document. I'm really sorry. Witchy Woo, such a great title, and I wanted to get it right. She also worked on the incredible Thimbleweed Park as a co-writer and as a self-proclaimed Crohn's badass. Lauren, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So sorry for messing up this intro, but we don't do retakes here. It's just how it is, and I think it gives me a little more personality.
It's fine.
Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. In spite of, the lockdowns and everything, I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Yeah, pretty all right, I guess. It's I guess lockdown has been testing our patience and testing our mental resilience, but I hope we can all go continue to go through this and maintain our sanity to some level, and we'll just have to take it slower these days. So Lauren, as I already mentioned before the podcast, as it is courtesy with You, Me, and the Industry, I let the guests choose a topic and bring it to the show, and they can choose whatever topic they want. So do you have a topic for us to discuss?
I was thinking it would be interesting to discuss diversity in the games industry. It's something that, as a woman in games and somebody who's neurodiverse and, has a long-term physical health condition, I take, relatively seriously. So, I think that would be an interesting topic to discuss.
Yeah, awesome. I'm really interested into the topic. What do you wanna? Is there something in diversity, especially, you want to share with us?
I think I like talking about, diversity in how it in the games industry when we're thinking about it, how different it can be in terms of representation, how important the indie scene is to diversity, because I feel like the AAA industry has a lot of catching up to do. Like, they may have more career-wise paths in place that are supposed to promote diversity, but when we're talking about narrative design and telling stories and representation of queer people, disabled people, people of color, you're going to find so much more in the indie games industry.
Yeah, and do you see there's a certain issue with AAA striving to be more diverse, or do you think indie games have to be more loud, they have to be more inclusive, and they need to push harder, so in the end, AAA will just adopt a more diverse setup of protagonists, for example?
I hope that, my hope would be that AAA takes this more seriously, because I feel like sometimes most recently, when I'm thinking about representation in games, obviously Cyberpunk's been at the forefront because they had a rather sort of not confusing, but they had their gender tied to the voice, the tone of the voice of the character, didn't
right.
They? It was, and when we're thinking about just in general, I'm thinking about queer representation as well. In Assassin's Creed Odyssey, there was a DLC where you could be queer the whole way through the game, but then you had to basically be heterosexual in the DLC.
All right.
it's things in AAA like that I feel like they have a lot to catch up on. I feel like that the teams that make these games, sometimes if you had maybe a gay voice in the room, they might have said something like, oh, you know, forced sexuality after you've been able to play the whole game as a bisexual or a gay character is a bit off. You know, or if somebody trans had been in the cyberpunk room, they might have said, you know, women can have deep voices, you know, the voice shouldn't be tied to the presentation of the body. You know, I feel like indie games, because marginalized and minority groups often make up these teams to tell their own stories, they tend to just have those type of voices in the room so they don't make those kind of mistakes as often.
Yeah, and if you take, for example, Last of Us Part 2, a big title last year, which has won countless of Game of the Year awards, and they've been rather diverse with their casts and also with their the themes of the game, to be more precise. But they have also seen a certain type of backlash from some communities regarding the representation of their transgender characters, or transgender character, to be more precise, in the game. So do you think it is now enough to have just a single person, like quote unquote single person in the room to discuss these issues, or does everything need to be sort of like checked and discussed thoroughly to make sure that the content is actually like really well thought out and well developed?
Yeah, I feel like I also think the problem with there only being one person in the room is that you can feel quite intimidated to speak up. Like if you're the only woman in a room and there's a bunch of people who are being sexist, or they're just coming up with absolutely ridiculous female representations, it can be quite daunting to be the single challenger in that space. So ideally you'd have more than one person in the room so that there are multiple voices being heard. And because we're not all a monolith as well, you know, different women have different opinions about certain things. But The Last of Us 2, I was going to say, is actually a really good example of that, like you were saying, the pushback that they got. I think that is why AAA sometimes play it safe, because where it is more mainstream and they do tend to cater more to a particular historically it has been more of a white male gamer kind of space.
Right.
You know, that people were getting really mad about even just Abby's body, like, oh, a woman can't be that muscular. And then, you know, you'd see on Twitter these like muscular women replying like, I look like Abby. Like,
yeah, right.
And I thought I absolutely loved the trans storyline in The Last of Us 2. I'm not trans myself, so I don't say that that's a perfect representation. Sometimes I think as well in AAA, a lot of the characters who are from marginalized groups, often their stories aren't very joyful. They're usually dealing with their identity as a source of conflict in the story. I feel like in indie games, sometimes there's more joy and celebration of those identities instead of them just being a source of conflict. And I hope that in the future we can see that kind of shift more as well. Like I saw that Bugsnax has been nominated for a GLAAD award because it just has kind of you know, LGBTQ representation threaded throughout that game in a really nice way and in a joyful way. It's not a constant source of like, oh no, this is, you know, this identity is a source of conflict. It's just
Yeah, I actually finished this game recently and also platinumed it. Have you finished the game?
Yes.
Well, actually, to be honest, without going too much into spoilers, I think even though I agree with you totally that it's been a really wholesome game, the end kind of scarred me in a certain way. I was not prepared.
No, I wasn't prepared for that.
Yeah, the ending was like, wow, they really went some places, I guess.
They did. They really did go some places. I mean, the whole game was kind of trippy in an Island of Dr. Moreau kind of way, but yeah.
Right, yes, totally. Yeah, actually, the moment I was able to change the grumpuses into like the certain flavors or the certain Bugsnax, I totally lost it. It was like the game was like changing, like the total, like everything I know approached was totally changing. And there's a funny story. There was like one quest line where I had to turn Bethany green so she could hide in the bushes or something, and she was already this like this like cucumber or like pickle monster I turned her into. And so I was like, oh game, I'm already ahead of you. I already did that. So that was awesome. Yeah, and do you have any other examples for wholesome or like maybe more cheerful stories about like diverse characters or queer or gay content?
I feel like we're talking about games that do have some queer representation. I know Hades has got some, you can have a bisexual main protagonist in that. Right. I know Celeste is an interesting one that's indie. The developer has sort of came out as trans and said that canonically Celeste is trans, and it's sort of about a journey of finding herself. So, and I enjoyed Life is Strange with queer representation in that game. I mean, always when I think of queer representation in games like Dragon Age, like BioWare with Mass Effect and Dragon Age, they always do it well. Like I really enjoyed in Dragon Age Inquisition, Sarah and Dorian's storylines. I thought they were really good.
Yeah, great name, by the way. Yeah, okay, great. So maybe let's start here with something more about yourself. So how did you end up into being part of the games industry?
For me, it was actually because of my disability. I didn't go to university like a lot of my colleagues. I had been working just regular jobs. I used to work in a call center for an energy company. I did complaints, and my Crohn's disease just became so unmanageable that I had to leave work. And I had always been a fan of point and click games. I used to play all the LucasArts adventure games on my Amiga when I was a kid, back in the 90s. And I started replaying them because I didn't have much else to do. I was stuck in bed. I was, having medical treatments. And I stumbled across the Adventure Game Studios forums, and people make their own point and clicks there. And I thought, well, this is really interesting. I wonder if I could do that. I wonder if I could make a game, because I've been such a passionate fan of them for such a long time. And I knew one of my friends who I co-founded Drop Monocle with, Socks Brooker. I said to him, hey, you're an artist. Do you want to try and make a game with me? And so we just gave it a go and did a few game jams, and it kind of progressed from there.
Great. Wow. That's so cool. I'm actually also a very, very big fan of point and click adventures, so I'm so glad. Well, to be honest, we actually kind of met through our passion through point and click adventure games, because I came across your name on the Twitch chat, I guess, for the kind of anniversary of Monkey Island, and there was this gamesfoundation.org live stream with Ron Gilbert and what's his name?
Yeah,
I forgot his name.
David Fox was there. There was quite a few people.
Right, yes.
Chat, yeah.
Yeah, and it's so cool to hear that you've just basically become you've been such a big fan of point and click adventures, and then you just sort of like did you teach yourself? Did you taught yourself how to make these games, or was there like certain like was it a little bit more handholdy? Did you know somebody who could teach you a little bit this or that?
I think with the benefit of working on the Adventure Game Studio engine was that there is a massive community behind it. So, if I was ever having a problem, I could post on the forums. People would give a little bit of advice. Dave Gilbert, who runs Wadget Eye Games, he was on that forum. Lots of historical posts from people who have made a lot of games on that particular engine were there. In terms of the design, Tim Schäfer had some excellent PDFs that he shared at some point. I can't remember if they're on the Double Fine website. And then there's Ron Gilbert's blog, and he's talked in the past online about puzzle dependency charts. So there was a lot of useful resources just on the internet through doing research that I could use. So it was sort of a combination of help from the AGS community with coding, and then learning from people like Tim and Ron indirectly, just from reading their stuff and then just giving it a go.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then you at one point even were involved in the making of one of the greatest, at least I would say, one of the greatest point-and-click adventure games of the last 10 years, Thimbleweed Park.
Oh yeah, I mean that was like one of the craziest things for me to end up doing. I never imagined I'd get to work with people who made the games I loved so much when I was a kid. You know, David Fox and Gary Winnick, Ron Gilbert. It was amazing to get to work with them on Thimbleweed Park, and you know, it was a really great learning curve for me as well, just to actually get to talk to these people about, you know, the craft of point and click adventure games. And yeah, it was amazing to work on.
Yeah, that's awesome. And maybe you can go a little more into detail of like what was it like to work with Ron Gilbert, like one of the legendary creators of point and click adventures.
Ron is, I mean, I know he's known as Grumpy Gamer, but he's not he's not really that grumpy when you're working for him. He's a really great boss. He was really great to work with. He gave me so much freedom in terms of my writing. Basically, he hired me to do a lot of the flavor dialogue. So I can't take any credit for the plot of Thimbleweed Park. Mm-hmm. The plot of it is all Ron. But he was focusing so much on coding the engine and, you know, the puzzles and the story, that a lot of the conversations, you know, he handed over to me. And, you know, he'd have characters who he hadn't really decided a personality for them yet. So he'd say, hey, you know, if you want to think about what the Madame Morena, like her, for instance, he's like, you know, I don't really want her to be a conventional witch, as it were. So, but if you want to just play with that, just go and see what you can come up with for some of the side characters. You know, you have more firm visions for people like Ransom the Clown, because I actually wrote pretty much, I wouldn't say I wrote all of Ransom, but I wrote a very big chunk of Ransom. He was one of the main characters I wrote, along with the agents. I wrote a lot of the agents. So yeah, he had more clear ideas for them, but with a lot of the side characters, I did get to just kind of have a bit of freedom, which was really fun. And you know, he said to me with Ransom, like when I had to send him in a sample of Ransom to get the job. Like it was, you know, he was taking samples from different writers, and he said, you know, I would rather with Ransom you went too far and I had to pull you back than not far enough.
All
and
right.
He thought I was disgusting and gave me the job. So
yeah, I wanted to say he's a rather filthy character. Yeah, and were you also pushing for like the sort of uncut DLC for this? Well, there's like this certain bleep noise when he was cursing. Did you push for an uncensored version?
I definitely wanted there to be an uncensored version of Ransom. Ransom is, I have a real soft spot for Ransom after writing him. But yeah, the beeping was fun just because they had to go in and do it by hand, and I think they all hated me by the end. I think, you know, they'll be glad to never have to beep another one of my lines again. And I also think translators had fun trying to translate some of Ransom's swear words. So yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, maybe a question related to this, like how difficult is it actually to write humor? I do think it is. Yeah, it's rather difficult to just sit on your table, or like sit next to your table and stare at the page and say like, well, now 3, 2, 1 funny. Now I have to put the funny lines on the paper. So yeah, what is the process of like writing a funny dialogue, I guess?
That's a really tough question, because I think, I mean, I don't know, it's probably not coming across in this podcast that I'm a funny person, but I think a lot of people in my life would describe me as somebody that makes them laugh. I tend to just start writing down stuff that amuses me. I read a lot of comedy. I'm inspired by a lot of funny people. I think having played those LucasArts point and clicks in the 90s has shaped some of my sense of humor. I used to read, you know, and it wasn't just LucasArts. I played a lot of the Revolution ones, like Beneath a Steel Sky, Broken Sword, which had humor in them. I loved the Discworld games. so Terry Pratchett's humor has been a big influence on me. And I grew up watching just, a lot of British comedy, like, Monty Python and Red Dwarf and stuff like that. So all of those things kind of, I guess, have shaped my sense of humor, and I think it does translate quite well into point and clicks. So I just end up writing a bunch of stuff, and a lot of the time I will bounce it off of my game development partner Socks, because if I can make him laugh, I'm like, I think it'll be all right. If he laughs at it, then it probably is funny. So
yeah, right. And was there a certain issue ever where you thought it was really funny, but Ron was like, no, this isn't funny at all?
I don't think that ever happened. I do think Ron at times was like, I can't put that in the game because it's too rude. So that definitely happened a few times. I don't think he was ever like, no, that's not funny. I think as well, sometimes there was things that we had to be careful with translation, because and there's the famous thing about Monkey Island 2 with the monkey wrench.
Oh yes, tell me about it. I'm a German, so I know the difficulties of this puzzle.
Yeah, exactly. So because you're German, monkey wrench isn't necessarily a thing in Germany.
No.
So it's only a thing if you're an English speaker.
Right.
And so in Thimbleweed Park, we didn't want to do stuff like that. So you had to be sort of careful that the idioms would translate for non-native English speakers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and related to this, about the writing process. So how does it work in a video game? Because there's not a real I don't want to say a structure, but it is so fluid and it changes maybe constantly throughout. Like maybe you have to add a character at one point, or you have to remove a character since he doesn't or she doesn't work. What is it like to write for a video game?
You have to have some flexibility because things can get cut. Quests can change, characters can change by necessity. Like, for instance, I wrote a lot of Willie, the drunk who kind of wanders around the town. He definitely his story changed over the course. So things I wrote for him originally got completely scrapped, and I had to rewrite him. And you kind of have to be prepared to, I think it was Ginsberg who said, kill your darlings. You have to essentially be prepared to think, I wrote this amazing thing, but it's just not going to work anymore. So it's not. You have to kind of accept those parts of it. But with games writing, you have to keep track of everything. You need to have, we call them dialogue trees, because especially in a point and click game where you have lots of options as things you're clicking, and then you've got multiple choices. So you have to be able to keep track of everything. So organization is key in those scripts, having a good clean set of code so you know what you're doing when you do have to go in and edit. But it does kind of function, I suppose, similar to a film script, because you're not writing all the descriptions in, although sometimes you'll write sort of in the margins, almost like this action should occur here, this animation should occur in keeping with this dialogue. But it's a little bit more complex at times, but as long as you keep track of everything and you've got your dialogue trees and you know what you're doing and you're prepared to let some things go when it's not working out, it's not too challenging. It's good. I always really enjoy it. I find the challenge of it fun. I think that's why I really love this job.
Okay. Yeah, and speaking of related issues to writing, have you ever had any issues with writer's block?
Not so much with the dialogue. I sometimes get issues with, when I'm writing my own games, the plot or the puzzles, and I'm trying to figure out how to make everything work into the game. Dialogue tends to come a bit more easily, but when I was given kind of freedom to create characters or give them their own personalities in Thimbleweed Park, sometimes I'd get a little bit like, I don't know, how do I want to portray this character? I think with Madame Moreno in particularly on Thimbleweed Park, I kind of had a moment of like, how am I going to portray her? How is she going to be interesting and distinct? Because Ron said I don't want her to be like a typical, like voodoo lady or witch or whatever. I want her to be a little bit different. So then I ended up going for like capitalist hippie. But yeah, it took me a while, I think, to get there with her, because I just like, how am I going to do her? But yeah, so I think every writer struggles with writer's block at some point. I don't think there's anyone that's immune from that.
Yeah. And do you have any solutions? What works for you?
I feel like talking to people. I feel like, I like to, if I get writer's block, sometimes it's best to just put put it down, walk away, take a breather, talk to some people. I like to, often if I'm not, in some kind of contractual obligation, not to, unless, the only time I won't do this is if I'm contractually not allowed to talk.
Yeah.
I will just go to my husband and I'll say, like, oh, I don't know what to do with this character. I was thinking this, and sometimes he'll say, oh no, that's rubbish, or that's good,
I
or
see.
and it sort of helps to kind of talk it out a bit. And sometimes you kind of just have to write in spite of it, and it might just be rubbish, like you're just putting rubbish on the page, but eventually you might get a little grain of something that you see in that rubbish, and you'll be like, oh, hang on, like it. Let's expand on that and latch onto that a little bit. So I think those are kind of my ways of dealing with it.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, and since you were responsible for many of the characters in Thimbleweed Park, there's one character in particular I really loved. It was the sort of like the gardener, I think. What was his name?
Oh, Doug, yeah, Doug.
Yeah, I was just like, he was so funny. It was just like the way he said digging. I lost it every time he was just on screen.
Yep. I did write quite a bit of Doug. Doug actually, yeah, some of his stuff got cut, which I was sad about. But yeah, he was originally called Sam, but I asked Ron if we could change his name to Doug because he was always digging, and it was just a really stupid fun.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Yeah, he is. I do that. I love Doug. There's so many characters in Thimbleweed Park that I love. I have a real soft spot for Chet, the pizza guy, just being scared of everything because of his conspiracy theory brother.
Right. Yes.
Although now with all the conspiracies theories that are going around lately, maybe not as funny in the current climate.
Aged poorly due to unforeseen reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe coming off of the writing questions, what is the state of writing in games in general these days?
I feel like it's improved a lot. I feel like historically the plot was an afterthought. I feel like a lot of I do sometimes feel that it can still be the case with some games. They can sort of not really. I think some developers think, oh, I don't need a writer. I can just come up with an idea and it'll be fine. But it is a skill. Writing is a skill. It's plotting a game, plotting the puzzles, writing the dialogue. I mean, even just things like even small dialogue options. Like when you think about fighting games, when characters often repeat the same line over and over again. There are people that write those. They're called barks, and you want them to be good because if somebody has to hear them 100 times, you don't want them to be really boring or really annoying.
Yeah.
So there can be talent in even writing those basic kind of lines. But yeah, I feel like it has improved a lot. I feel like people have changed their perception of what games are, because I feel like years ago people just thought games were first-person shooters and beat 'em ups and things like that, whereas now they're seen as a valid storytelling medium. That you've got walking, I suppose what you would call walking simulator, like What Remains of Edith Finch. What's it called? Is it Ethan Gray? I can't remember. There's a few games where you're just exploring a narrative, walking through the world. You've got point and clicks, you've got visual novels, dating sims. When we're talking about representation, a game like Dream Daddy, you're telling a queer love story. It's mostly through just an interactive novel, but those things are all valid as games, and so I think writing in games is bigger than ever.
Yeah, shout out to Felix Kramer, podcast alumni. He worked on this game.
Oh, fantastic.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And do you have any games in particular that where you think, wow, this was really stellarly written of recent memory?
I mean, I there's so many games that I love. I really think that Unavowed by Watch Eye Games' Dave Gilbert was incredibly well written. I've loved all of his stuff, but I think it deserved all the praise it got. I think that there's games like Hades recently has had, there's so many layers to that story. You just keep going back on the runs, peeling away more and more of the narrative. It's off the top of my head, gosh, there's so many. I love visual novels as well, so I really did enjoy Dream Daddy. And when I think about games that I've always really loved, I've always loved the storytelling of BioWare. So, the Mass Effect games, even those, people found the ending at times controversial. I feel like that was, not necessarily the best, but throughout that, I was really engaged in the story. I was also really engaged in Horizon Zero Dawn's story. I found Aloy's journey to be really fascinating, and I loved. I felt like she was a really empowered female character, but not in a empowered female in quote stereotypical way. She wasn't being romance. She was just this girl trying to figure out this mystery and fighting her way through this land. I found her story really compelling.
Yeah. And you gave me the perfect transition to a very special question, tailor-made just for you, with the Mass Effect Legendary Collection, Legendary Edition, I think, just being announced a couple of hours ago. And there's a probably maybe infamous tweet of yours where you said you liked Mass Effect Andromeda, but you also loved the fact that no one can reply to this. Well, the tables have turned. Now you're here, and I am replying to this.
Oh no! Okay.
Okay. So what is it about Mass Effect Andromeda? I haven't played it, so I'm curious.
So, I mean, I feel like, for me personally, I agree with a lot of the criticism that comes with that game. I think it was, too long. I feel like some of the areas were too vast. The open world is not always necessarily a good thing. I think sometimes, open worlds can feel quite empty. And obviously they had the animation difficulties. I still think the story was ultimately, I really liked Ryder. I thought Ryder was not a bad protagonist at all. I feel like if you came into it and you were wanting another Shepherd, then yeah, you probably were going to be disappointed. Ryder was not Shepherd. Ryder was their own person. I really enjoyed the performance that was given. I played as a female Ryder. I enjoyed the romance with Jarl. I picked him, the alien worlds. I found that really interesting. I found the whole concept of it really interesting. But I also, because I am a bit of a Mass Effect stan, I read the novel that would have been the DLC for the game. So I also feel quite strongly that because EA kind of rushed BioWare to release that game, I think if it had had more time to bake, it would have been a really, really good game. I think if they had been able to incorporate the Quarian arc like they had wanted to, it would have been just brilliant.
Yeah. And related to Mass Effect, and also the controversy surrounding the Mass Effect 3 ending, do you think it is okay for fans to demand or to ask for a different ending?
I mean, they can ask for it. They have the right to, but I don't know if it's realistic. I mean, I was disappointed with the ending. So I feel like what was sold to people was that with the Mass Effect games, that all of the choices you made were going to make such a huge difference to the ending, but ultimately the ending was only ever going to end, with those three choices. So I can understand why people felt disappointed with that. I was one of those people, but I still loved the game. It didn't diminish my enjoyment of the series overall. And yeah, I mean, I don't know how they would don't know how they would go about changing those endings. Because you'd have to rework so much, because you'd have to make all of those choices to really fit what people wanted. You'd have to make them all truly, truly matter. And I think that would be so much work when you're trying to remaster a game.
Right. But I think they actually changed the ending for Mass Effect 3. Am I correct? Because I think it was such a huge backlash, and it was only one ending in the beginning, I think. And then they added a couple of more endings.
Yeah. I think there was I think they had I think they had a few endings, but I feel like they didn't. How it ended originally, it was just real abrupt. It was kind of like, oh, you've picked this ending, and then you get like almost like a flash of a cutscene.
I see.
And then with the change, it was they kind of. I remember like in one of the endings that they showed like a crash landing, and then you see all the crew doing stuff, and it sort of elaborates on what happens to people after you've made your choice. So it sort of gives you almost like an epilogue, as opposed to a different ending. At least that's my recollection of it at the time. It's been so long since that whole controversy.
Right, yeah. And I mean, with female Shepard, you have a very strong and famous protagonist, like male or female, but especially female. So how do you avoid like a Mary Sue issue with protagonists?
I feel like they have to have some, I mean, obviously, like a key with Mary Sue's is they tend to not have flaws. So you want your character to have a flaw, and that flaw can't be they're too pretty. Like that's
right.
that's not a flaw. It has to be a real flaw. I mean, with Shepard, you're making choices, and as renegade Shepard is kind of, I suppose, at times a little bit Mary Sue, but not in a horrible way. They definitely struggle with some of their issues. They definitely haven't always made the right choices. But yeah, it's just one of those things where they can't do everything perfectly all the time. There has to be some internal conflict. There has to be some failure. There has to be something they do wrong. Otherwise, because that's not real. Nobody makes all the perfect choices all the time. And I think when you're writing men or women, I try to not think too much when I'm writing a woman. I'm not trying to. I think sometimes why you need to have women in the writers' room is I'm most connected with Shepard because essentially the male and the female character were written the same, and that is true of a lot of people. Women and men have way more in common than they do different. If men and women are faced, we may do things differently at times, but ultimately if you're a man and a woman are both captain of an intergalactic kind of spaceship, they're probably going to make similar decisions. They're probably going to have had similar, goals. So I felt like because they didn't write her as a, in quotes, woman,
right?
She felt real to me. She felt like a very real representation of a woman because she wasn't written as a woman, I guess. I loved that she wasn't frail. She just kind of kept going. She was strong. It was, as somebody who has been through chronic illness and has had to kind of pick myself up after my own disappointments and failures and has to keep going. Somebody like Shepard actually really speaks to me because I don't, I'm not somebody that just kind of lays down and goes, that's it for
right.
me. I need rescuing. I'm like, no, I gotta get up and keep going,
Yeah, right. Yeah, and speaking of women, and a very famous video game called Final Fantasy 13 once said, mothers are incredibly strong, or something related to this, which always made me roll my eyes a bit because the line was so cheesy. But yeah. I know for a fact that you're big into the 100 baby challenge in Sims. So how's it going?
It's going okay. I haven't done much of it in a while. I've been doing bits and pieces in lockdown. I've been playing the Yakuza games a lot recently, but
awesome. Yeah,
with the 100 baby challenge, it's even though I'm not really a baby person, I do find that challenge hilarious. So yeah, it's one of my favorites in challenges. I will watch people do that challenge on Twitch all day.
Yeah. Any recommendation? Anyone you want to shout out?
Oh, I always love Abby formerly from Giant Bomb.
Hmm.
She's on Twitter as Yabby. Her Sim streams are always my favorite to watch. And Plumbella's good as well. Plumbella's a good Twitch streamer for The Sims.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and speaking of Yakuza games, so how, like, where are you currently in the Yakuza story? Because I recently started with 0, and then I played myself all the way through 6, and now 7 is ready, and I just need a short break from all the sort of like betrayal and yeah, sometimes stupidity of their games. Like, I love these games, but it's like in some regards they're just very stupid. But I also love them for their stupidity.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's why I love them so much because I mean, I had no idea. I was recommended to them by my husband. He's like, you will love these games. And I was thinking, this just looks like Japanese Grand Theft Auto. I don't
Right,
think I'm
right.
really that into it. So I kind of was a bit reluctant to play it. He's like, just play 0. It's set in the 80s. You'll love it. And I can't fault him. He's not often right, but he was this time. And I absolutely loved it. And 3 through 5 has just been added to Game Pass. So over Christmas, I played 0, 1, well, Kiwami and Kiwami 2. And yeah, and I've just started 3. So I'm working my way through those.
Oh
And
yeah.
I absolutely love it. I loved people were like, oh, I hate Majima over it. It's so annoying. I was like, I loved it.
Yeah, like Majima is one of the best characters in my opinion. Like he's
He
yeah,
is.
yeah,
And, for me, I mean, I know that at times I don't always think that playing gender for comedic effect is great, but I actually, in my mind, Majima is as Garomi is this gender fluid gay icon in my mind. I truly think he loves Kiryu. So
yeah. I mean, there is also always a certain sort of love in the air atmosphere of these games. I mean, there's shirts flying everywhere. Everyone is
oh
ripped,
my
and yeah, it's sort of like yeah, a little bit homoerotic, I would say, in
It
some
is
regards.
incredibly homoerotic. I will also say that the in Zero, like the old lieutenants, when they take their shirts off, they should not have the bodies they have under
Right.
those shirts.
Yes. I mean, also they shouldn't like. I mean, like Kiryu shouldn't survive like getting like a pipe into the face of a guy on a bike. Yeah. So, but
Bullets only count in cutscenes in Yakuza. Bullets only count in cutscenes. You
exactly.
can get
Yes.
shot so many times by
Yes.
people, and then just one graze in a cutscene, and you're basically dead. So
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, are you wearing your Majima construction shirt at the moment?
I never take it off.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. I guess we all wish to be part of this construction team.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and moving on, yeah, you're also a big advocate on accessibility in video games. And I recently came across, yeah, I was more put into the spotlight with the accessibility controller for Xbox, and yeah, especially like Last of Us 2 or Last of Us Part 2 got high praise for its accessibility. So yeah, what is the state of like yeah accessibility, and do you think nowadays people are now talking more about these issues than before?
Yeah, I think it's getting better, but there's still a lot that needs to be done. I feel like The Last of Us 2 was fantastic for how inclusive it aimed to be for just everybody, people who are new to games, people who have mobility issues, people who have visual issues, all those type of things are so important because everybody deserves the right to play a game. And games have been quite, an exclusive kind of media in the past because if you were visually impaired, then you weren't going to have any luck with those games. And, it's one of the few medias where if you have an inability to use a controller easily, you could pay a lot of money for a game, but then if you have a disability and you aren't able to progress, then basically you're locked out of the story. You're
Mm-hmm.
locked out of content you've paid for. And I feel like it's really important that we give people who don't have the same abilities as others a chance to experience these amazing stories and these enjoyable games. For me personally, I don't have mobility issues, but I do have a diagnosis of Asperger's or autism spectrum disorder, and for me, sometimes I get overwhelmed when there's a lot of visual input on a screen.
Mm-hmm.
So I recently played Nier Automata,
Yeah.
and sometimes I would get so overwhelmed by the amount of information coming through, the amount of enemies on a screen, and some of the visual explosions. It can make it difficult for me to react quickly because my brain is processing
Oh yeah.
so much information. So having the option to turn on these auto bot moves, so I mean, essentially at times the game could almost play itself because you have the pod, and if you have the game on easy mode, you can switch off this automatic fire function.
Yeah.
And so to have that gave me, moments where I was overwhelmed, just a chance to catch up and not constantly be punished for my neurodiversity, which essentially, is what it can feel like at times when you're disabled, like you're being punished for not having the same brain or same, physical ability as others. The thing I struggle with, I feel like sometimes the studios aren't very understanding, and sometimes the players aren't very understanding. Like you get a lot of people who are in the get good camp, who are like, you can, if you add an easy mode to Dark Souls, it ruins the game for everyone else. And to those people, I'm always like, well, if you don't want an easy mode, don't use easy mode. Like,
yeah, right.
You can still do extreme hard mode, but why should somebody who would like to experience that, but who has issues with using a standard controller or mouse and keyboard, why should they be punished?
Yeah,
why
right.
can't they, experience that game too? And then you have people who like there's I want to say, is it Dead by Daylight? It's the game with the horror serial killers. Like apparently they've been reluctant to put in stuff for colorblind players.
Okay.
Just things like that. Some people can be reluctant to just make these little concessions because like it's not worth it because it's not going to be used by a huge number of people. And it's like, yeah, but the point of accessibility is it needs to still be there, even if not everybody's going to use it. It's still important to have it.
Yeah, right. I think it's a very, very serious issue, and I think it's great to see that at least one of the biggest games, or maybe the biggest game of last year, actually was really forward thinking with its inclusivity, and hope other game developers just follow suit in the future.
I really hope that we see people taking them as a template for how to do accessibility, and that they will listen to disabled people themselves. With Cyberpunk and the whole epilepsy nonsense, if you'd had some people who were neurodiverse in that room, or you'd had some people who were disabled in that room, I'm pretty sure that wouldn't have got through.
Yeah, right, totally.
Because if I had been on that development team, I wouldn't have been able to handle those flashy images. I mean, it would have been way too much for me. And the fact that there wasn't even just an option to switch them off just really is surprising. These type of things, need to be addressed way sooner. They shouldn't be an afterthought. They should be part of the design process. And I feel like that's where The Last of Us got it right. It was clearly part of the design process all along. And that's really important.
And can you see yourself, or like maybe not yourself, but can you see that maybe smaller developers with like only a three people or something really struggling with these issues compared to like 1,000 people who worked on Cyberpunk, for example?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, you do need resources to do these things, and it can be hard when you're just a small team to access the same level of resources as these AAA companies. I mean, they can literally hire consulting firms that will tell them exactly what they need to do to make these games accessible. They can experiment with hardware if they want. They've often got a lot more things at their disposal.
Yeah, right.
The best thing I think as indie developers we can do is, I mean, certainly on Twitter, I know there are people who discuss their own disabilities and how it affects their gaming. It's trying to reach out and talk to people with disabilities about what works for them, looking at accessibility controls on games that already exist, and trying to think about how you as a smaller developer would implement those. and just being aware of it. Because I think even without disabilities, even if those people aren't on your team as a small developer, you can still reach out to people who would probably be happy to volunteer or maybe do some play testing, people who, you could potentially hire on as consultants, if you've got it in your budget to do so. And it's always advocate for paying people for their work. So, ideally, you definitely want to pay disabled people when you can. But yeah, definitely, and include disabled people in QA testing.
Right.
So, yeah, I think those are sort of steps that you can take as indie developers to try and make your game more accessible.
Yeah, that's totally true. And I hope we see in the future that anybody can pick up the games and play them in the end.
Yeah, definitely. And also, I feel like as well, we've seen that games can really help people who have Alzheimer's and stuff like that. And I feel like when you create easy modes for older people who don't, again, your mobility starts to decline pretty much after the age of 25. So as you get older, your gaming skills are just going to decrease and decrease and decrease, not necessarily dramatically, but I think they say you're in your peak ability with your fine motor skills to do gaming at about the age of 25, and then it starts to drop off. But if you have these easy accessible modes, you can give people like Alzheimer's patients access to games that might really help their quality of life and enjoyment, extend some of the use of their brains, help them therapeutically. So there's wider applications just beyond young people with disabilities. And I think we want to try and make this a thing that everybody can enjoy. And, we're an aging population. I hope to still be playing games when I'm in my, 70s. So
yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cyberpunk 2077. Right in 2077.
Yeah.
the real inclusive version.
Yeah, the special inclusive edition.
Yeah, definitive inclusivity edition. And I think this has been such a wonderful interview. Thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Thank you for asking so many great questions.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. And maybe I have one or two left. And but before that, I wanted to ask you, do you have by chance a piece of paper and a pen with you?
Yes, I can. Well, I can certainly get one pretty easily.
That's awesome, because I have something in mind, maybe for the end of the show. But I have one last question related to your game making process and how you ended up making games, especially. So you decided to make free to play games. So how is the thinking process involved for basically making a game for free? Like, is it like is it like a little bit daunting, or is it like how do you say, like, for example, do you really think about like, okay, now this will be free, now we can't put as much resources into it, or we have to release it quicker now, or we sort of hope that we will maybe get some funding through this route or something? So what goes into the process of thinking about making a free-to-play game?
So when I started, I had no idea that it was going to lead to a career. So I just kind of, the first game I made was, Witchy Woo. I mean, I really do not encourage any of you to download it. It's not a very good game. It was just basically, Socks was learning to animate. I was learning how to do puzzle dependencies. It was for a game jam. I mean, we won the game jam, and the game was not that good. But it was make a game in a month. That's a monthly thing that ADS does, called MAGS. And we just kind of threw ourselves in the deep end. We're like, let's just try. Let's just see what happens. And it was a really steep learning curve, and it was really good. And it is really good to finish something. And then that set us up to make our next free game. And again, there was always that hope that maybe someday it would lead to something. But we really just made it almost with the mind of building a portfolio, just to we want to put something out there, see if people enjoy it, see if we have a knack for this, and if people respond to it, we'll keep doing it. And people on the forums did really like our stuff. We had a lot of positive responses, and then I joined a few indie development groups and ended up working on Thimbleweed Park and doing a few other bits. I've worked on a few different things, and then Socks also has kind of been picked up by his animations. I mean, when you look at Witchy Woo, like his animations and art style, they have developed so much, and he's moved on to doing some really, really great stuff. He's been working with do you know Oliver, age 24, who runs the Fall Guys social media account?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's made some video games with him. Like he made a mobile game called Longkeith the Hot Dog Thief.
Okay.
And he also has been doing some work with Little Red Dog Games, who I can't remember the name of the game now, which is terrible because it's a really good game. Yeah, he's been doing some work with Little Red Dog Games and sort of doing 3D modeling now as well. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff that's come out of just making those 3 games that's helped us move into paid work in different companies. So yeah, I didn't go into it with a mind of like, oh, I really want to make money out of this, or I'm always going to make free games, or feeling any kind of pressure. But it was more about just testing what I could do and learning and figuring stuff out. And I feel like that is the best way if people want to get into the games industry, is to just do it. Like just make a really bad game. Just make, I learned so much from my first game. Like I've watched a couple of people do a let's play of our game Witchy Woo, and it taught me a lot about UI design because people could not figure out the UI. Also, we didn't make it clear that there were 2 rooms in the game, so people just got stuck in the first room and like, we can't finish this game. It's like, no, you just need to walk to the left and then you can leave and go into the garden. But it wasn't obvious,
right? So
people didn't figure it out. So we learned a lot more to like mark past a lot more clearly and point and clicks in the future. So it's stuff like that making a bad game, you'll learn a lot.
Awesome. Yeah, truly inspirational. And yeah, like I said, thank you so much for coming onto the show. Where can people find you, and do you want to plug anything, what you're currently working on or what you've released so far?
I have, if you know Octavie Navarro from Thimbleweed Park, he did a lot of the artwork.
Great artist.
I have been helping him a little bit with his games. I haven't been doing too much in the pandemic. I'm working quietly on some projects that I haven't really announced them yet. But Octavie, I do proofreading. I do a little bit of writing for him. So we most recently worked together on The Librarian. And I've also done editing and a little bit of writing on his Midnight Scenes series. If people want to find me, they can find me on my Twitter, which is @BoostGoose. And if people want to see a little bit of my writing stuff, I have a website called lozwrites.com. LOZ Loz, because I'm Lauren. But yeah, those are my socials, I guess.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and as usual, I will always put the links and everything into the show notes, and you can just press the button and follow Lauren directly. And if you want to follow me, I am at Dorian Chow. That's DORIANCHOU on Instagram and Twitter. And also, if you want to follow the podcast, you can follow at Yumi Industry on Twitter and Instagram as well, where I post, I guess, sometimes really weird drawings of whatever comes to my mind related to the show. And also, I guess, some quirky remarks or some insights, I guess you could call them. But maybe you will find also a certain drawing I'm going to mention right now, because before I wrap up the show or leave the listeners to the outro, I saw that you are easily distracted and not motivated to work, and then you just draw butts.
Oh!
So I wanted to ask you if you could draw a butt, and then also if you could teach me the real ins and outs of like a proper butt drawing.
A proper butt drawing?
Yes.
Well, okay. I usually get Socks to draw the butts, but I am pretty good at drawing butts.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know why Socks is the artist, quite frankly. I mean, I'm clearly the one with all of the talent. But yeah, I can draw a butt. where am I going to send this butt?
You could just send it via Twitter, I think. Maybe
By Twitter. Okay.
maybe you can, and I will just put it in the show notes. And I don't know, this looks like a bird with a big body, but there's no real butt. Maybe I can. Is this now a real defined butt? No, it's not. It looks so wrong.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what happened with this butt thing is we were supposed to be working on. I can't even remember what the game we were supposed to be working on is, but it was because this was a while ago. And like I said, we ended up because we've been very fortunate to get paid work. We haven't had much chance to collaborate, and so we ended up. I just said, I just want you to draw a butt and make the butt walk around the screen, and it just lives in the clouds. It's just a butt that lives in the clouds. And so then he ended up just drawing this butt that walks around. We had all these different ones. I actually will see if I can find the pictures of the butts that we drew, because those are actually pretty good. But I will send you my butt doodle on Twitter.
Awesome. Yeah, I think I made a certain drawing of a person with a butt and also a very phallic-looking bird, which maybe I'll release also. It's like I'm a terrible artist, and that's also the fun thing I think about me drawing things. But yeah, and then I will just maybe upload both of our maybe perfect butts, and there's no wrong butt, you know. I want to just
no,
yeah. So my drawing and Lauren's drawing are both equal good in terms of buttness. And if you want to see them, check out Twitter when I post the episode, or Instagram, and then maybe you can tell me which one is better. I'm pretty sure it will be Lawrence. All right then, yeah.
As a butt aficionado, I hope it.
Yeah. The song goes, "I like big butts and I cannot lie." And the truth is, this is now the ending of the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope I will. Not see you, but I hope you will tune in next time with another great guest. And thanks for listening. And stay safe and take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.